Next half hour, I'll be reading from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This first article is by J. Dale Schumacher. Subsidies for stamp data center among the largest ever. Data centers tend to be bankrolled by corporations worth billions. Yet the builders also demand massive subsidies from state and local governments. The Genesee County IDA is now joining the fray with one of the largest subsidy packages to date. In the race to build data centers for the AI boom, subsidies from state and local governments have become common and expensive. But few have proposed subsidies as generous as those being offered in Genesee County. Officials with the Genesee County Economic Development Center are offering Stream U.S. data centers $1.46 billion in tax breaks for the creation of 125 jobs at a 3-building data campus. The subsidies work out to $11.7 million per job. It's one of the largest subsidy packages for a data center yet, and the cost per job may be the most expensive in U.S. history, according to a review of available data by Investigative Post. Among data centers, the closest comparables are a $8.3 billion package awarded to Amazon by Indiana in 2024, and a $1 billion package awarded to the company by Oregon in 2023. The Indiana project involved 1,079 jobs at a cost of $7.7 million per position. Among all subsidy deals in New York, comparables include $6.4 billion awarded to Micron in Syracuse, $5.6 billion to Alcoa in Messina, and $1.2 billion to Global Foundries for a chip factory outside of Albany. The package of public funding awarded to Tesla in South Buffalo totaled $956 million. A data center built for Yahoo in Lockport more than a decade ago involved subsidies of $478 million. In each of those other deals, however, the subsidies resulted in hundreds or even thousands of jobs. Though many data center subsidy deals are kept secret, data compiled by Good Jobs First shows the cost per job for Stream is highest recorded yet. This is an extremely high subsidy package. Giving any company over $1 billion in tax breaks is excessive, and giving a company $11 million per job is unjustifiable, in my opinion, said Kasa Tarsinski, the Good Jobs First researcher tracking tax breaks for data centers. The bulk of the subsidy package is $1.43 billion in sales tax breaks on the chips, servers, and other equipment Stream plans to purchase. That means Genesee County and New York State are out $716 million each in potential revenue. The subsidy package also includes a $31 million mortgage tax break. There's just no way the local government and state government can recoup that lost tax revenue, Tysinski said. A spokesperson for Governor Kathy Hochul said the state is monitoring Stream's project and proposed subsidy package. In her State of the State address, Hochul said data centers must pay their fair share, in quotes, of the demand they put on the state's electrical grid. Governor Hochul believes that economic incentives should be used to deliver the most jobs and other community benefits as possible, and we continue to look for ways to ensure that data centers are not draining resources or driving up costs for New Yorkers, spokesperson Kristen DeVoe said in a statement. prospect of the data center and the massive subsidies Stream says it needs have angered local residents and members of the Tonawanda Seneca Nation. Sharon Larmar, a town of Alabama resident, published a letter to the editor recently encouraging her neighbors to speak out against the project at a public hearing scheduled for 7 p.m. Thursday at the Alabama Fire Hall. We are hardworking, blue-collar people. We pay enough taxes. I just feel it's not fair for them to get those breaks, she said in an interview. I think they would have the money to support themselves. They don't need tax breaks. About the project. Stream is proposing a 3-building campus at Stamp over 90 acres at the 1,250-acre industrial park. Its building will have a footprint of 2.2 million square feet, equivalent to 38 football fields. Part of the campus will be built on land Stream is acquiring from Plug Power, the hydrogen energy company that recently canceled plans to build at Stamp. The proposal is Stream's second attempt to construct a data center campus in Genesee County. Though the company won approval for its initial project last year, it canceled those plans following a lawsuit from the neighboring Tonawanda Seneca Nation. The Genesee County Economic Development Center, as previously reported by Investigative Post, has turned to data center developers to fill up vacant space at its struggling Stamp Industrial Park, located halfway between Buffalo and Rochester. In September 2024, as the Economic Development Center was beginning to entertain bids from data center builders, one development firm taped a meeting it held with Chris Suzy, the agency's vice president. Investigative Post later obtained a copy of the recording. With Plug Power on pause, Suzy said in the recording the Economic Development Center was looking to data centers to come in and save the day a little bit. A year ago, Stream won a 3-bidder competition to build a data center at Stamp. The company then amended its proposal this year from $11 billion in total spending to $19 billion. That's up from an original cost of $6.3 billion a year ago. Because the size of the company's project kept increasing, including spending more on chips and servers, the size of its sales tax break also went up from $472 million to $800 million to $1.4 billion. To operate the data center campus, Stream plans to hire several dozen technicians and security personnel. Jobs there will pay, on average, $96,000 annually. Investigative Post calculated that employees would have to work for 122 years to earn the $11.7 million it costs to create their job. Additionally, construction of the 3-building data center campus would employ an additional 1,000 workers temporarily, according to the Economic Development Center's CEO, Mark Mass. That's a far lower figure than the agency reports on its cost-benefit analysis for the project, which says construction will employ more than 16,000. To operate the data center, Stream has said it will use 500 megawatts of electricity, more than 80% of all the power available at the Stamp Industrial Park. That's enough to keep the lights on in 400,000 homes. Meanwhile, project documents show the Genesee County Economic Development Center, the industrial development agencies that offering Stream the subsidy package, stands to earn more than $146 million from the deal. By the numbers. In Western New York, large subsidies tend to come in the form of property tax reductions. Think the $94 million payment in lieu of tax deal granted to Amazon for a Niagara County warehouse in 2022. Those tax breaks, primarily affecting local schools, take away money the districts could have tapped for decades, resulting in higher taxes for area businesses and homeowners. Sales tax breaks are different. They're one-time revenues generated by individual sales. That means the $700 million hit to both New York and Genesee County from the data center project would be more immediate. Should the project win approval, that money the county will miss out on now rather than over the coming decades. Every time somebody doesn't have to pay their taxes, somebody else pays more, said State Senator Liz Krueger, a Democrat from Manhattan, who's critical of large tax subsidy packages and has proposed a 3-year moratorium on new data centers in New York. Given the size of New York's budget, $260 billion this year, the state can do without the money, Krueger said. But the uncollected sales tax could do a lot of good for local governments in Genesee County. From the sales tax break, Genesee County would be out $606 million. The city of Batavia would be out $100 million. Stream has also requested a $31 million mortgage tax break based on $3.1 billion in plans to borrow for the project. That tax break would result in these revenue losses. The town of Alabama, $12.5 million. Genesee County, $6.2 million. The Rochester Regional Transportation Authority, $6.2 million. It's a direct transfer of wealth from people of New York to the owners of these large corporations, said Tuszynski, the Good Jobs First researcher. Supporters of the data center say that without the subsidies, Stream will plop its data center down in another, more compliant county. The alternative to a package proposed by GCEDC is no project, no jobs, no new revenue. Christian Yonker, chairman of the Genesee County Legislature, said in a February statement to Investigative Post. Yonker, whose father serves on the GCEDC board, refused an interview request for this story. Another community will offer these benefits and the project will move somewhere else, he said. Whether we like it or not, data centers are going to be built throughout the state as they are necessary for technology infrastructure that we all utilize in today's society. Another county lawmaker, Vice Chair Miriam Kluttenberg, told Investigative Post she was more concerned with the fees Stream would pay to the county than its subsidy package. According to its proposal, Stream would pay an average of $9.5 million annually in property taxes and host fees to Genesee County, the town of Alabama, and the Oakfield, Alabama Central School District. That's an average of $892,000 more per year than its property tax bill. I'm more interested in what the advantages are to the county and to the citizens and the taxpayers, Kluttenberg said. The Economic Development Center said Stream would also pay around $4.5 million annually in sales taxes on its electricity usage. In total, that is $500 million directly coming to Genesee County's municipalities and schools over 30 years, spokesperson Earl Wells III said. The Economic Development Center also stands to benefit from approving Stream's project. Should the agency's board vote in favor, Stream would owe it more than $146 million in fees. Stream has proposed paying $2.5 million up front, then 40% once the first phase of the project is open. The rest of the fee would flow once phase 2 of the project is open. Stream would also pay the agency's lawyers at Harris Beach $500,000, as well as the lawyers at Phillips Lytle, the firm overseeing the environmental review of the project. Investigative Post sought comment on the subsidy package from the members of the Genesee County Economic Development Center's Board of Directors, but did not receive a response. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This next article is written by Jeff Kelly. Major tax hike in Buffalo appears inevitable. The city is in such a deep financial hole that something close to the 25% property tax increase floated by Mayor Sean Ryan is probably unavoidable. The alternative, major cuts in public services, including police and fire, is politically unpalatable to Buffalo's elected officials. Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan's administration started dropping bombs in the last couple weeks. At a February 19th press conference, the mayor let slip he would propose a 25% hike in the city's property tax levy when he submits his first budget proposal, which is due April 15th. Then Ryan announced he was lobbying state lawmakers to allow the city to issue deficit bonds through the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, also known as the Control Board, to help cover the city's operating costs over the next couple of years without the Control Board reverting to strict oversight or hard status. He also wants to boost the Control Board's debt limit from $175 million to $500 million. Both measures require changes in the 2003 state law that created the Control Board. The reason for the proposed tax hike and borrowing, a structural budget imbalance, that is, the difference between the city's recurring revenues and predictable costs. That's Ryan's Finance Department recently has pegged at a minimum of $50 million, and in the worst case scenario, as high as $109 million. These are big figures to lob into the month-long conversation about city finances that's been littered with competing and sometimes contrary numbers. Outside of the mayor's office, virtually nobody in City Hall is on board with the idea of raising the city's tax levy by 25%. No one has yet advanced proposals to cut city expenditures either. Fillmore District Councilman Mitch Nowakowski, chair of the council's finance committee, said each percentage point equates to about $2 million. He said it's unrealistic to imagine cutting $50 million or even $25 million in expenditures for the fiscal year that begins July 1. In a word, it would be catastrophic, he said. The way our budget is structured right now is already bare bones with minimal service. To maintain those services, let alone improve them, Nowakowski said, the city has to get out of structural deficit. That's been more than a decade in the making. That'll require turning the knobs on the only recurring revenue source the city controls, which is property taxes. First, the numbers. To explain the need for the tax increase, the Ryan administration last week released a chart describing the deleterious impacts of former Mayor Byron Brown's stubborn insistence on not raising taxes over most of his 19 years in office. By failing to raise the property tax levy to keep pace with inflation, basically 2% each year, the city left a cumulative $602 million on the table, according to the Ryan administration's calculations. The property tax levy was $146.3 million in 2006-2007, the first year Brown wrote a city budget. In inflation-adjusted dollars, that would be $235.2 million today. The actual tax levy in the current budget year, which ends June 30th, is set at $184.5 million. A 25% increase on that number in the coming year would bring the city closer to, but still shy of, aligning its tax revenue with the rate of inflation. Brown, during his long tenure as mayor, was more likely to lower the levy than increase it, as Investigative Post has reported previously. Meanwhile, costs continue to climb at a rate far greater than inflation, thanks largely to the rising cost of health insurance and pension benefits for city employees. To make up the mounting difference, Brown spent down more than $100 million in savings that the city built up between 2003 and 2012, when the control board was still in hard oversight mode. Those reserves ran out in 2019, and it seemed like Buffalo's day of fiscal reckoning had arrived. In June 2020, as the budget year was coming to a close, the city had to borrow $25 million to cover its cost. The Brown administration blamed COVID shutdowns for the shortfall, but the real culprit was years of budgets that inflated revenue projections, understated expenses, and made up the difference with one-shot revenues. Then, in 2021, the federal government slowed the city's march toward insolvency with $331 million in pandemic relief money. The city used nearly $225 million, plus many millions more accrued in interest on that pot of money to cover budget gaps. Now that money is gone too, last year, acting Mayor Chris Scanlon's administration was compelled to balance the books with $6.8 million from the city's rainy day fund, by law intended to be used only in the event of catastrophes. In the current budget year, which ends June 30th, the city will have spent $703 million according to the most recent cash flow projections by the city comptroller. Revenues are expected to finish at $678 million. That figure does not include the promise of $40 million in additional state aid the Ryan administration wrested from the government last month. $30 million to help balance the books on the current budget, $10 million towards next year's spending plan. It does include $26.5 million for the sale of 4 city parking ramps to a newly created parking authority, another one-shot source of income. Without the parking ramp sale and the extra state aid, there's a $50 million difference between revenues and expenditures. That's the gap of 25% tax hike aims to fill. Fred Floss, the Control Board Secretary and longest-serving appointee, said restoring structural balance to Buffalo's finances will be a painful process that will take years. It will definitely require a tax hike, he said. It may require both the sale of the parking ramps and deficit bonds. The longer you wait to raise revenues, the harder this problem is going to get into the future, he said. So what can be cut? The city budget process works like this. The mayor drafts and submits a budget to the Common Council. It's due April 15th. By law, it must be balanced at least on paper when adopted by June 8th. Lawmakers, by simple majority vote, can accept the budget as is or make changes, but only to expenditures, not revenue projections. If they make amendments, the mayor can accept the changes or veto them. If the mayor vetoes the amendments, the council can override with a 2/3 vote. If the council makes no amendments, or if it fails to override a veto, the mayor's proposed budget passes into law. Basically, that means if Ryan and the council, and if the council can't agree amongst themselves, the mayor will have his way. Niagara District Councilman David Rivera, a Ryan ally, called the tax hike inevitable, but said lawmakers have an obligation to push for spending cuts, as well as exemptions for the city's poor and elderly homeowners. We can't let the full burden of our past budgeting mistakes fall just on the taxpayers, especially the most vulnerable, he said. There has to be some pain on our part, too. In the current fiscal year, nearly $500 million of the projected $703 million in projected spending goes toward personnel. Salaries, $292 million. Health insurance for active employees, $75 million. Health insurance for retirees, $58 million. Payments to the state pension system, $71 million. The city paid a little over $36 million in debt service, which can't be cut. The city also spent about $71 million sent about $71 million to the school district. That number hasn't changed this year. That leaves about $100 million for everything else: outside contractors, utilities, supplies, fuel, capital improvements, the cost of settling lawsuits. There are savings to be found in those categories and possibly over the long term in health insurance cost, but not $50 million worth. People and programs. Real cuts will mean programs and people, according to Floss, the control board secretary. You can always cut money, he said. Whether or not that's reasonable or whether or not it's going to have real negative impacts going forward is the question. The biggest cost centers in the city are, in order, police, fire, and public works. No elected official is yet suggesting layoffs in those departments, which are considered essential services. Police and fire are especially difficult to cut because by contract they have minimum staffing levels per shift, which translates to a minimum number of employees available to fill those shifts. Rivera said non-essential workers, including mayoral appointments, should be on the chopping block. Among the executive staff likely to attract lawmakers' attention are Ryan's 4 deputy mayors, each earning $200,000 a year, compared to 2 deputy mayors under Brown and 1 during Scanlon's 14-month tenure. Scanlon's deputy mayor made $148,000. North District Councilman Joe Golombek told the Buffalo News he thought he could put together a package of cuts worth $4 million, enough to knock the tax hike down 2 percentage points. He has not yet released that plan. Floss said the control board can help city officials evaluate the impacts of cutting people and programs. The board can analyze proposals to protect homeowners who are poor and on fixed incomes through the property tax exemptions. But he said the difficult decisions are in the hands of those elected to make them. We're not going to make recommendations on what to cut. Those are policy decisions, he said. Nowakowski said Ryan campaigned on honest budgeting and improved city services. That means attacking real numbers to expenses and then raising the revenue to match. We have a new mayor in town who's saying that he wants to take the city to a new level, to invest in improved services, and that we deserve nice things here in the city of Buffalo, he said. We have to pay for it. We can't do that completely on city taxpayers' backs, but we have to get out of a structural deficit that's been 16 years in the making. Of articles and features from the Investigative Post. We read from the Investigative Post on Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Your reader has been Margaret Mack. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. As always, please feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, and any questions you may have. And please stay with us. Our Reading the Buffalo News will be coming up in just a moment.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,